Hey guys, it's Alec Torelli. What's up? And welcome to the hand of the day from the Park Hyatt in Goa, India. I am out here for the Poker Sports League, and I got the opportunity to be the wild card or the ambassador for my team out here. 12 teams entered the event. We played over 4 days, and it was an incredible event. It was really cool. It was a team format, which created a lot of different nuances, I'll be covering perhaps in a later video. But for now, I have a really interesting hand that I played during the event. And a little quick recap, the event spanned over 4 days, like I said, and each day the teams would compete in different types of tournaments in order to earn points. Now these points translated into big blinds for the final day. So the team that earned the most points or that did the best in the first 3 days ended up making it to the final day where they would enter with a bigger chip stack, therefore giving them a better chance to win the grand prize. Now the prize pool was $500,000 on the final day, but the first 3 days we were essentially playing for big blinds.
Hand of the day.
Now this hand comes up in the main event on one of the previous days. One of the first blind levels, 1,500 blinds, 15,000 chip stack, and I'm under the gun +1. It's 8-handed poker, so the tables are a lot shorter. People are going to be a little bit more aggressive. There's also a dead big blind, and so his money's already dead, and that's going to make the hand, or at least the opening ranges, be a little bit wider. Anyway, I'm under the gun +1 with ace-10 of clubs. I'm going to be opening regardless, and I decided to make it 250. The cutoff calls and the small blind calls. So we go 3 ways to the flop. The flop comes queen 8-7 rainbow with 1 club. Decent flop for me. I think, a c-bet on this flop might work some of the time, but I think it's possible that at least one opponent's going to have hit something that's going to allow them to call 1 bet. People generally like to call bets more often in the early stages of tournaments, especially when the amount of chips they're calling relative to their stack is insignificant. Here we start with 15k stacks. If I bet 300 or 400, it's such a small amount that people are going to be liable to call with gut shots, middle pairs, some backdoors, maybe even something like ace jack with a backdoor flush draw. Just because it's such a small bet, people are so much more prone to peel in early stages of tournaments. So all that is to say that if I do decide to bet this flop, I gotta plan on barreling anytime I pick up equity on a lot of different types of turns. Now there are a lot of turns that help my hand, like a 9, maybe a jack, a club for sure. A king is definitely a good barrel card for me, a bad card for my opponents. An ace helps me as well, of course. So there are a lot of turns that I could barrel, and I generally wouldn't be attacking these boards without A, a plan, and B, a reasonable chance to pick up a lot of equity on enough turns that you can profitably continue bluffing. So here on the flop, I've made up my mind. I'm going to bet 400, but I've done it with a game plan. It's not just like, oh, I raised pre-flop, I'm going to c-bet because I'm the raiser. That's not enough to really give you guys the maximum win rate or EV in situations like this, especially in multi-way pots and dynamic situations on these sorts of board textures. So I bet 400. The cutoff folds, which is great because now I'm guaranteed to be in position in the hand. Barreling on the turn and river becomes a lot more effective. The small blind calls, which is okay, and we go heads up to the turn. Turn comes a great card for me, the Jack of Clubs. Great barreling card. He checks. I bet 1,100. Pretty clear bet here. I mean, I could maybe bet a little bit bigger, but betting this turn is going to be happening pretty much 100% of the time with my hand specifically. I'm trying to get him to fold an 8. Maybe he's even going to fold a weak queen. Unlikely, but maybe I get him to fold that by the river. There's also a ton of cards I could hit to improve. So great barreling card for me. He checks. I bet 1,100. He calls. Let's go to the river where things get interesting. River comes an offsuit 10, so I don't make my flush. I hit a pair, but it's very unlikely I have the best hand at this point. Now my opponent bets out 1,600. But before we get into the action here, I want to talk about what I would have done had he checked. So if my opponent checks this river and I bet, I'm essentially repping 2 pair, maybe like the worst hand I could be betting for value is like queen jack, a set, a 9, a 9x type hand, or ace king. So I would be betting with those types of hands, maybe mix in some bluffs. Ace 10 seems like a reasonable bluff to have, just because I'm not really bluffing that often on this river. So I might go for a bet here on the river and try to get my opponent to fold something like a queen, which he's going to have a decent part of the time. Maybe he has something like king queen, he decides to fold. The problem is that if he has like some two-pair hand, even though maybe he only beats a bluff, he's still very liable to call with that hand. So I would probably bet this river, go for a small bet, just try and get my opponent to fold a one-pair type of hand. Maybe he even has something like Jack 10 that peeled the turn, and he might even make his superhero fold with something like that on the river. So I'd go for a small bet here on the river. Anyway, my opponent bet, and now I'm thinking to myself, okay, what types of hands is my opponent gonna lead out with here on the river? Well, there's two types of hands. There's bluffs, and there's 9x types of hands. It's really unlikely my opponent has ace king. I want to just quickly talk about why that's not possible, simply because A, he called pre-flop, he probably would have 3-bet with that hand, and B, he check called the flop, which he's probably never going to do with ace king, and he's definitely not going to check call the turn with ace king with no club draw, and he can't have ace king of clubs because I have the ace of clubs. So ace king's ruled out. He could have a 9x type hand for value, but it's pretty unlikely he has 9x. I mean, we have to run back through this hand and say, what types of hands can our opponent have that contain a 9 in them? Well, he could have 8-9, maybe 8-9 suited. There's 3 combos of that, but he probably is going to fold the turn with 8-9 just because it's a really bad spot to call out of position on this textured board against an early pre-flop better, me, who bet into 2 people on the flop, etc. So he's probably going to fold 8-9 on the turn. He could have 10-9 suited, but remember, there's a 10 in my hand and there's a 10 on the board. So there's 2 combos of 10-9. He might also check 10-9 on the river half the time, let's say. So you could maybe say there's only effectively 1 combo of 10-9 that he actually is going to have. He could have queen 9, maybe queen 9 suited. That's definitely possible. There are 3 combos of that. Jack 9 suited, maybe, but there's really not that many 9s. So there's also all of the bluffs that he can have. Like maybe he's turning an 8 into a bluff, maybe he's turning a queen into a bluff, maybe he's turning a jack into a bluff. And so when you add it up, there are definitely a decent amount of bluffs in my opponent's range that he could be betting this river with, just trying to take advantage of the new board texture and hoping to get me to fold even something like 2-pair or aces or kings or a big queen, etc. So I think this spot is a decent situation to turn my hand into a bluff. I block 10-9, which is pretty important. I also block ace king, and I could easily have ace king myself, and I just don't think that there's that many 9s that he's going to have, and I think a decent amount of the time he might check the river with some of those as well. So I decided to make it a small raise here, 4,400. I really don't have to raise that big here, not only because I'm repping a straight myself when I raise, but simply because my opponent is going to play perfectly against my raise. He's going to fold his bluffs, and he's going to call with his straights. So I definitely don't think my hand is good enough to call here. He could easily have a jack or a queen, but I think my hand is definitely a good candidate to make a raise with on this river. And I choose a small size because I'm giving myself a great price on my bluff. It doesn't have to work that often in order for my bluff to end up being profitable. So I raise, my opponent snap folds, and I don't want to be results oriented and say, oh my God, my raise was excellent because he folded. He definitely could have called with a 9 here, and I definitely would have lost a decent portion of the time. But I think in the long run, especially when you factor in like my live read and the situation and my opponent I was facing, all gave me further indicators to think, you know what, this is a good situation. Turn my hand into a bluff and take down the pot. I hope you enjoyed this hand of the day from India. Let me know your guys' thoughts. Leave me your thoughts in a comment below. What would you have done? Am I crazy? Is this a good play? I would love to hear from you guys. And yeah, stay tuned to my channel. A lot more stuff coming out from here as well. I'll try to get my thoughts on the league in general and the tournament, as well as hopefully, don't want to promise anything before it comes out, but hopefully a vlog about this entire event and my experience here, which I think is going to be really cool if I put it together the way it's in my mind. All right, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys next time on the Hand of the Day.